before and after EU meetings. Do you see reason of concern that he's behaved in the same way when he met with fellow NATO colleagues? And if so, an investigation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the first question, of course we know that Russia, Iran, North Korea are working closely together. We know that Iran is one of the suppliers of essential gear for Russia to maintain and solidify its war against its unsolicited provocation, war against Ukraine, that's clear. So it tells you something when these reports come out that Russia is sharing so much also with Iran. So that I cannot tell you what intelligence is telling us, because obviously that's intelligence, so that we keep that secret. But you can see yourself from open source, and we noticed for some years that there is a close connection between Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China. Question: all 30 that Russia is our most significant threat. There is no discussion about that. A threat to our security now and longer term, and also that all 32 allies be committed to make sure that we have the collective defense in place, take the necessary steps required to ensure indeed that we can deter any offense. So we are working together with all allies on this every day.
Okay, now the third row in the center, Al Jazeera. Wait for the mic, please. Wait for the mic, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Step Fazer from Al Jazeera.
Hi.
I want to clarify something. You have been under criticism in the last couple of days because of the interviews you gave in the weekend. European diplomats felt you overstepped your role because the mood in Europe was not endorsing the war. Israel and the U.S. are now fighting, but there was a much more hesitation, and also the fact that you said all these countries are coming together. The message the European nations were saying that they only want to help when there is a ceasefire, or at least the fighting has stopped. The message you're giving now sounds different, so could you please respond to this criticism and clarify exactly what these 30 countries are going to do?
Yeah, I don't think I think I'm still saying the same, and it is that, as I said on Sunday, that NATO has always been consistently clear that the whole of the alliance, that obviously for Iran to possess a nuclear or a missile capability poses a threat not only to the region, an existential threat, by the way, to potentially Israel, but also a threat to Europe, and Iran is an exporter of chaos to the region and to the world for many years now. Let's not be about it. And what the United States is doing now is degrading that capability. And yes, I applaud that. In alliance, you will always have different views. That's unavoidable. It is an alliance of democracies. But when it comes to not accepting having a nuclear and missile capability, we all agree. The whole of the alliance has also condemned the indiscriminate attacks of Iran on its neighbors. That was in a meeting only last week with ambassadors of the Gulf states here at NATO headquarters. And then, indeed, when it comes to this group of countries coming together, most of them from NATO, to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz, the sea lanes, are open. And indeed, that begs the question, given the fact that the war is going, what does that mean in terms of the what question, the when question, and the where question? Active countries are working together. The United Kingdom is leading that effort under Prime Minister Starmer, and this between the United Kingdom, that is France, and I'll make sure that those questions will be answered. And this is to President Trump's request. He said, hey, I would have rather have that seen earlier starting. And there my reaction is, Europe needed time because the United States, for good reasons, was not able to inform allies of what was going to happen now 3.5 weeks ago on Saturday morning, because that would have that would have potentially led to a leak or whatever. That is always a risk when the US had the opportunity to take out Iran's. I totally understand that. I don't criticize that, but it means that it takes some time for Europe to come together, and that's happening as we speak.
All right, second row, Reuters.
Thank you very much, Lee from Reuters. I'd actually like to follow up on Irina's question. You're watching France 24, and we've just been listening to the head of NATO, Mark Rutte.
that, this press conference is taking place just minutes after Donald Trump tweeted about the NATO alliance. I believe we have this tweet to show you on Truth Social. It wasn't a tweet, it was a truth, but basically saying that...
I think we can even listen to it, James. Let's just go ahead and listen to what Donald Trump had to say this morning.
NATO nations have done absolutely nothing to help with the lunatic nation now militarily decimated of Iran. The USA needs nothing from NATO, but never forget this...
So a thinly veiled threat. Never forget. So indeed what we have is indeed an alliance which has, a big problem with the posture of the United States. Now it's interesting to note that when it comes to the situation in Iran, Mark Rutte has made it very clear that for the 32 members of the alliance, the main threat is Russia. But still, he's also saying, and he did say, and I quote, that in his view, NATO allies need to support the United States in its war on Iran, stating that NATO always considered Iran to be a threat, always considered that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon, but also explaining that for now the European partners had said that they would like to, keep, it's a relatively back foot stance when it comes to this war. And so what you understand is that Mark Rutte is quite clearly working in the background to try and get, more NATO involvement. He also stressed the fact that 3 missiles had been intercepted on their way to Turkey. But yes, it's, there is this Middle East concern, and also he did come talk about the problem of the ammunition stockpiles, which are indeed being taken away from Europe in part to be sent to Iran, but also stressing that in his view there needs to be more done to indeed recreate these stockpiles, that the industry needs to ramp up. Also saying, and this is true, that he is happy to see the budget increasing by 20% in 2025, which is of course a big hike when it comes to the financing of NATO, saying that it is now more fair. And in his view, he says, that for him, this is the strongest military alliance on earth right now.
And
indeed coordinating efforts by a vast number of countries, 32 in this case. And basically the biggest partner is the United States of America. So if this was a company, Mark Rutte would be the CEO. And basically the United States and the Donald Trump administration would be the biggest stakeholder in that company, which is right now saying that it is not happy with what's being done by this company. So if you are the CEO and you want to keep your job, well, you have to pay some lip service to Donald Trump. Now, I do believe that Mark Rutte has been very efficient when it comes to dealing with Donald Trump, telling him what he needed to hear on some occasions, also managing, and we all remember that, this was this year in Davos, Switzerland, at the summit, if you remember, de-escalating, and we don't exactly know how he did that, what was a major crisis with Greenland at the time, but it's true that these questions are being asked to Mark Rutte. Mark Rutte is obviously, I'd say, keeping, avoiding any criticism of Donald Trump, but given his posture, his job, that does make sense.
And Mark Rutte also said that it was thanks to Donald Trump if Ukraine was really back on the world stage at this point. Talk to us a bit more about NATO's role in the war with Russia and Ukraine at the moment, and if it really has the money and the resources to help.
Well, that's the big question mark. It's true that NATO has been, the main backer of Ukraine through a variety of programs. One of the main ones, and this is something he indeed talked about, was the JT, which is very much a coordination between NATO and the Ukrainian army, which today is on the continent, 800,000 men. Right now, we have people being sent from Ukraine to the Middle East in order to help with drone attacks in Iran. I mean, they are very, very good. They've learned a lot. And indeed, this interoperability, as it's called in military terms, between NATO and Ukraine is being built up. It's